It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Deverl Maserang, President and Chief Executive Officer of Farmer Brothers. Deverl is an innovative food and beverage industry leader with more than 3 decades of successful experience. He joined Farmer Brothers in 2019 as President, CEO, and a member of the Board of Directors, shepherding the company successfully through the turbulence of the COVID-19 pandemic. Deverl has led multiple turnarounds and global supply chain transformations, in addition to providing strategic business guidance to corporations as a consultant. Prior to Farmer Brothers, he served as President and CEO of Earthbound, farm organic and independent division of Danone. Previously, he was Executive Vice President Global Supply Chain for Starbucks and also held leadership roles with Chiquita Brands, Pepsi Bottling, and United Parcel Service, where Deverl started his career. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from Texas Tech University. Deverl Maserang, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here with you today, and thanks for the opportunity to spend some time into the corner office.
Well, it's great to hear your voice again, too. We always like to kind of start at the beginning and, would love to hear a little bit about your early years. Where did you grow up, Deverl, and, what was your early family life like?
Well, I was born in the panhandle of Texas on Route 66 in Amarillo, Texas.
Great. And family traveled around a little bit, or what did mom and dad do for a living?
It's unique for my sister and I. At an early age, I think I was 11 months old and she was, 23 months older thereabouts, and we were both adopted. And unfortunately, or I'd say fortunately, we were adopted, and it got our start. And I think for many that have walked that journey of being adopted, it really is the first step to put you on a successful path. And I can guarantee you, for my sister and I, being adopted and having a family that cared about us and gave us an education opportunity is the 2 single things in life for me that have been the keys to success. So, never knew my early biological parents from a young age. We always had 2 birthdays, our natural birthday, and then 6 months after we'd had our adopted birthday. So we were raised knowing we were adopted.
Okay.
And it wasn't until 25 years after, that we learned of our biological parents. And, every state's a little different. And for us, it was a situation where my sister just kept sleuthing to figure out who the biological, for lots of reasons, a lot to do with medical, but it was an interesting start to life. And we'll have more to say on that as you ask me specific things about that journey and kind of how we got to where we are.
Awesome. Well, that's a blessing, obviously, and I'm sure for whatever reasons that adoption took place, as you said, it set you on a path. What did your parents who raised you do? Were they professionals? Did they work out in the fields? I know the Panhandle.
Yes, my father was an electrician.
Okay.
And started on a line crew, and then worked himself all the way up into eventually the head of the union. And we used to have great debates as I was becoming more successful in management about that. But I learned a lot from him in regards to his view of kind of being the shop steward. And then he went into management in his last portion of his career. So he worked for the largest electrical utility company there in the Panhandle of Texas. Moved a couple of times, but then he wound up in Amarillo where their headquarters was until they were bought by New Century Energies, which is a bigger conglomerate as that industry then consolidated later in life. And then my mother was a executive assistant and for a superintendent of a school district, but she had a very interesting career from being a probate judge to a tax assessor and collector to then the executive assistant of the school board. Yeah. She worked in an independent school district there in the Panhandle of Texas in Amarillo.
Was she degreed? Did she go to university?
No, she didn't. Neither of my parents. They were all self-taught and, did a lot for my sister and I in terms of, creating a great platform for us to get educated, to move on through life and, grew up in, really good values in the Panhandle and, parents really were kind of led us in a path to, rely on, our faith and, our ability to work hard and play hard. And, we had a great, what I'd call a lower to middle class life, right?
Right. And it was just the two of you. Your parents did not adopt anyone else or have any natural children themselves.
No, yeah, it was my sister and I until much later in life, literally not until probably 2013 in that time frame roughly, where we met other brothers and sisters that were either half brother and sister or just recently found out that there was as 23andMe is becoming such a common thing now, found a cousin, and then we found out we had another full biological sister that was a year younger than I that we never met. And unfortunately, the really sad part of that story is she passed in October last year due to COVID, with us never getting to meet her. Yeah. And then the other half sister, when we first met her 2 weeks after she came in contact with my sister and I, we found out that she had terminal cancer and passed 2 weeks after and never got to meet her face to face. And my sister and her youngest son delivered the eulogy to a sister they never met. It was quite moving early on in life. So, life deals you lots of obstacles, and it's really how you take it. But my sister and I grew up together. We didn't know any different. And the sister that I just literally learned about, fascinating as it may be, she got the gift that we got, and that was a gift of adoption. And she led a great life under her adopted parents and raised 3 daughters. And I'm anxious to get to know them as time goes on. I haven't met them yet, and we'll do that in the coming weeks and months.
Well, family is how you define it, isn't it, Deverl? Huh?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. my adopted mother used to always say, legally, I'm more responsible than any biological parent, and that's absolutely
that's true.
Fact.
Yeah, that's right. We put adopted parents through a lot more rigorous review than biological parents do.
Oh, you got that right. Anybody can, get together and bear a child, but not everybody can be a parent.
That's right. That's right. Well, tell us some of the things. What were some of the influences that maybe inspired you, or that you recall from your parents during those early?
I think it's a great question, because as I've gotten older, I've reflected on that, and why do we become who we become? And the influences around us, and from a very young age, not really understanding, the early stages of our adoptive life, and that was really not talked about because it was all sealed by the state.
Right.
But as we learned later on, and then I reflected, it's clear that, wow, why was I such a hard driver? Why was I, such a salesperson at a young age? And, a close friend of mine who was a motivational speaker and author that I got to know several years ago, he gave me, 2 words that really describe what I think people like myself and others that are in similar situations find, that they don't even realize that kind of the human condition creates this with us. Is he used a word, this gentleman's name is Morris Morrison, and he was orphaned twice. I guess in my case I was orphaned once, but he said, Deverl, the real key early on, and probably the why we're the way we are, is we have orphan mindsets. And it's like there's nothing in that context of an orphan's mindset that you're going to fight. You don't have a lot of people fighting for you, so you fight for yourself and those that you care a lot about. And I think for me, that really defined the early stages of my life. And then I had a lot of great people, given that our adopted families, put us in situations, and our grandparents on both sides, our adoptive grandparents, they really were solid individuals. And my adoptive father's parents were farmers, two sections out in West Texas on the New Mexico border, and my mother's father and mother, they grew up in the ironworking industry during the Eisenhower era and built all the power plants and bridges and dams across the West. So he was a hard-nosed German guy that really knew how to build things, and he was a man's man. And I, through those folks and my uncles and aunts, we got a lot of great guidance. And I was always that kid that, frankly, I got picked on a lot. Picked on not from a standpoint that it was bullying, but all the middle-aged to older gentlemen. I guess I was one of those little kids that were just kind of a man's man, and they loved to tease me and put me through tests, and they'd hang me up on monkey bars and never let me down until I fell. They just made you tough. It's things like that influence you at those early formative years that I think are fascinating as you look back.
Were you a good student?
No. Oh, if we go too far into that area, people are going to say, "You got to be kidding, Deverl. How did you ever get to where you're at?" And there's a story there, and we'll probably have to talk a little bit more about that. But I was the proverbial. I didn't need to make more than a C. As I make a C and get out. Why do you want to work so hard? Because I was a sports nut. I was an athlete, and that's all I really cared about.
What sports did you like the most?
I played football the most, from, depending on what part of the country you're in, you could be called, YMCA to Pop Warner to, all those kind of things, depending on where you are in the United States. But, I did that from a very young age. I think my, second, third grade, played football. Of course, you're from Texas, you play football. That's kind of, and I also played baseball, and I played track, and, I played golf. I did a lot of things. I was on multiple, sports. I was a multi-sport athlete, but I was never any good at basketball or some of those. And then we limited based on the high school. We went to a small, 2A, 3A level school in Texas, which is on the smaller side. So football was how, you defined yourself in high school and middle school and elementary, and at least my hometown.
Did you have aspirations of college sports at all?
I did, and I did play college ball. I did play Division I.
At Texas Tech?
Well, believe it or not, Tech was my third school to arrive at. That's why when you say was I a good student, it goes all the way back to early on. I was a special needs kid, and I think that's partly the start I got in my life. And I don't think you appreciate the formative years, even from being a young child to growing up, but how that can have an impact on your learning. So I had one particular mentor, I think it was in second grade. I couldn't read. I got all the way to third grade, and they said, "Deverl, you got a problem." So my parents spent a lot of money on educating me with tutors and the like. And I had an eye condition that really was probably the thing that prevented me, but also had a learning disability early on. Yeah. I overcame all that, and it was really because this teacher, Miss Jolly, and she took me under her wing, and I went into special ed for probably a year and a half and did so well I got out and got back out by the beginning of my sixth grade. So from third and fourth and a little bit of fifth, I got back into the normal population by fifth and sixth grade. And that was kind of that formative, kind of that first mentor early on in life on the educational side that overcame a whole lot. And it wasn't that I didn't have the aptitude, it's just I think didn't have some of the skills to overcome those early things.
Right. What about entrepreneurial things? Were you involved in some of those growing up?
I could sell anybody anything. And I think my sister is the one, if she was on here, she would laugh because she would say, Yeah, he used to take all my things. She used better words like he used to steal all my little motors and out of my dolls or out of anything. And if he could sell it, he would turn it into something and sell it. But, I sold newspapers. I sold True
Yeah.
Grit. I sold, Christmas wrapping paper, light bulbs. I mean, we were poor. I mean, we if you wanted to get something and you saw, hey, I want to go to see my favorite football team in Dallas, Texas, because that's where I grew up and I was a Cowboy fan. My parents weren't going to afford to take me there. So I had to earn the trip by selling something.
Sure.
So I always put it to good use in terms of where I spent my money, but it was always on things that meant something to me that I cared about. And it was never like frivolous, like just spend it on whatever. But I liked the nice things, and I'd like to go earn the money to get there. So I could sell anybody anything. And I was a pretty good artist at the time.
Oh, cool. And did you have some odd jobs through high school, junior high
Odd
school?
jobs, yeah. I did. I worked. First job ever was washing tractor trailers at a truck wash
Oh my
on
gosh.
on Route 66 I-40. Right.
Yeah.
Then I did floors, and boy, did I learn lessons there. How to lay linoleum and rip up tile. I had some really tough guys that taught me. And you make those mistakes and you don't forget quickly that don't make that mistake. Don't leave the screwdriver on the floor and then lay the linoleum and put a hole in it, and then it ruins the whole job.
Pull it all up again.
Yeah, and then you have to redo it, and then you're the one that's having to pay for it. So you learn those lessons early. So I think my most formidable early job was kind of, while I was in college, I had to work to make it through.
Right.
And I worked for what was then Handy Dan, that became the precursor for what today is Home Depot. That was the founders of Home Depot were the early guys in Handy Dan.
Right.
And I thought that was going to be my career.
Yeah. Yeah. And did you always have an intent to go to college? Was that something that mom and dad had out for you, or was that kind of a self-motivated decision?
It was self-motivated. I think my parents, I was the first in my family anywhere that went to college and got a college degree.
Right.
The key to that was it wasn't because I wanted to go to college, it's because I wanted to go play football.
Mm-hmm.
So back to a little bit of that football story, I got recruited to play at Panhandle State in Guymon, Oklahoma, or what is right next to Guymon called Goodwill, Oklahoma.
Okay. And
that's a NAIA school. We went to the national championship. They do a playoff system, top 8 teams play each other until number one. We played the winner that year in the first round and lost. And it was just such a difficult thing because I was in love and I wanted to get married, and I wanted to marry my high school sweetheart that I'd known since probably 9 years old. And I was too far away from her, and she was back in Amarillo. I said, you know what? It's time for me to go back home. So I went and interviewed and worked my way in to go to West Texas State to play Division I. I played a year there. We got married. Just too hard to play Division I ball, be married and work and go to school.
Right.
And, that leads me really to this point where I just went in and told my wife, Mindy, that day, I said, we're going to Lubbock. She goes, what are you talking about? Well, I called the recruiter because I was going to join the military. He looked at me like I had 3 heads, and he said, you know what, Deverl? You have 2.5 years of school. Yeah, your GPA is terrible, but you know what? Go be an officer. What's the closest ROTC campus? It's in Lubbock, Texas at Texas Tech. So I went down there, interviewed, and got into Texas Tech on probation because my GPA was so bad. And I tell you, in one semester, got off probation, and then finished Texas Tech in engineering. Because remember, up to that point, I was just a general business major. Right. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I was just taking classes to play football, and wound up going in engineering. It took me a year and a half to kind of catch up with my peers, and then graduate with honors. So I think in life, once you find out what your purpose is and what you really want to get done, it's amazing. If you do the work, you can get there. And I'm a classic example of going on probation to a top tier Texas university and going on probation off on the first semester, and then boom, I made it into the engineering school. But the side note, you want to guess what college they allowed me in? Because they wouldn't let me in engineering day one. Believe it or not, they let me in the College of Education of all schools.
Ah,
I have nothing against my friends in education. I love them dearly. I think education's the freeing thing for everyone.
right.
It puts you on a trajectory. But in my case, literally, it was the way into the school on probation. And then the next semester I was in engineering. But boy, did I have to work hard. Because
Fantastic.
basically I did high school all over again on my own at night
Sure.
to catch up
Yeah.
in math, sciences, and the physics so that you could pass the engineering courses.
Right.
And all that was because I wanted to be a pilot.
Yeah. Well, now what happened? Because did you go in the military? I didn't see that in your background.
I did. I was in
Yeah.
the Air Force, and
Yeah.
for the last 2 years at Texas Tech, being in ROTC, you go to officer training in the summer of your sophomore year, and then the last 2 years, your junior and senior year, you're technically a warrant officer.
So
And
it
I
was
did
Air Force
everything.
ROTC. Yeah.
I was Air Force ROTC
Yeah.
at Texas Tech, and I wound up a week before graduation. If you go back pre-Desert Shield, if you remember that, it was
Yeah.
1987, 88.
Bush won.
And
Yeah.
they had a RIF, a reduction in force in the military. We weren't going to get regular commissions. It was going to be a reserve commission. They said, hey, guys, we're having a RIF. So if you want to go interview with any of the companies, go do it. I went out. I looked at 3 companies, amazing companies. And then I compared what they were going to offer to what I was going to get in the military.
Mm.
And it's like, oh, my, I have an engineering degree. This is really valuable.
Yeah.
And I looked at, wow, $30,000 a year versus maybe making 14,000-ish
Yeah.
as an officer at the
Right.
time. And I go, well, this is no brainer. I
I
didn't get my pilot slot. I wasn't even going to get my nav slot. So I wanted a second seat was going to be a navigator, but then I got an engineering slot, which was fine. It was going to be cool. But I tell you what, I interviewed with 3 companies, 3 amazing ones. UPS made me an offer, and they said $30,000 a year. And I said, you got to be kidding me. That's how much you guys pay? Yes. And man, was that a life-moving decision that I can look back now and say, wow, 10 years of my life at that company, amazing things happened across that period of time, great mentors, some of the best that I hold in my life to this day.
Right. Wonderful.
And trained under one of the best systems that one could train under.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. As an industrial engineer,
yeah.
In UPS.
Was UPS public at that time, or were they still privately owned when you joined them?
They were privately owned, and we had this, I still have it in my office. It's called the policy book, the UPS policy book. We used to quote it all the time. And in that book, it would, we're never going to be a public company. We're always going to be a private company. Of course, that's changed. I left before they went public. But the good thing is, what an amazing company.
Yeah.
And then to finally go back and work and live in Seattle, where the company was formed, as later in my career as I went to work for Starbucks, it was fascinating because I'd go down to that museum and see the Annie Casey Foundation and the museum, and it's right there on Pioneer Square. I have such fond memories, and I hold a lot of my success in life to those early days at UPS and making that decision to the Air Force and then to, UPS first job as an industrial engineer. Such good memories and such good training early on in your career.
Tell us about 2 or 3 of those foundational learnings that you took away from your time, your decade at UPS.
First and foremost, UPS is without question, and I'd say there's maybe Westinghouse back in the day, and clearly UPS had this program where they taught you process. So when I mean process, I'm talking about from A to Z. A lot of people would look at that as TQM and various Lean Six Sigma approaches, but UPS taught you how to deconstruct a work process, and it really set the foundation for me. Second thing is, learning to become an operator. Now, the operators at UPS always used to laugh at the engineers. They say, "Oh, you guys just, steal our watch and sell us back the time." And I'd say, well, I do click the watch, and set the standards, but you guys could never do our job. And I always used to tell them, just give me a shot. Give me one shot and I'll prove to you that I can operate just as well as the operator. So one of my early mentors, Mike Hosfeld, and a few others, Hank Kropchak and a few others, and a few district managers said, you know what, we'll give you that opportunity. And I went into my first UPS package center, because they call it a package car.
Right.
And these are the UPS trucks, really, as we look
Yeah.
at them today. But they call them package cars. And I ran my first. Well, in the first year, I started with a small package center, and then wound up getting two more added, about a third of the state of New Mexico that I was operating. And in that year, I was the most improved 4 quarters in a row at the quarterly, manager meeting, and best every quarter. So most improved and best on 3 package centers in the state of New Mexico. And from that point forward, when I went back into engineering, you never got any funny looks from that point on. It's like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. So maybe we would listen to him and his team a little bit more.
Yeah, fantastic. And then a little later on, you had about a decade with the Chiquita organization, or a little bit more than that, I think. Tell us a little bit about your experiences there. You kind of moved into senior management, I believe, in that organization. And again, kind of 2 or 3 of the key learnings that you took away from that.
I'd had quite a bit of success post UPS as I made a couple of moves in between UPS and Chiquita. But as I arrived at Chiquita, it was my, a true first multinational VP role.
Right.
And I went as VP supply chain strategy. I think the things that I learned at Chiquita that are most memorable and I'm forever thankful for is the fact that you never appreciate as much a multinational until you work in one that's truly multinational.
Right.
And it spans global supply chain. So I cut my chops on so much relative to understanding global supply chains and origin countries in Central and South America and other parts of the world. And I had so many great opportunities. And I really, when up to that point in my career, I was at probably 15 years up to that point when I entered Chiquita. And I'd worked hard, where my contemporaries were working 40 hours a week, I'd work 80 to 100.
Wow.
And I'd say, if somebody else, you won't outwork me. So outwork. Yeah, you might be smarter, but at the end of the day, that's not what really, cuts it. It's really execution. So I made it my practice and my team's practice to really be good operators that could execute well. And I tell you, that served me so well. As I moved up through Chiquita, there was a point where my mentor at the time, which was Wahid Zaman, and our CEO, Fernando Aguirre at the time, I always made a reputation on over delivering, under promise, over deliver. And in that period of time with the team and I, and really learning to manage people and getting the most out of people, it was a situation where I was able to just really set great operational numbers set forth. And I said, well, I want to learn more and I need to learn manufacturing because grew up in logistics, both distribution and transportation. And I want to learn manufacturing and I want to learn how to run a business as a GM. So they would always give me little pieces that you couldn't really mess up, but then we would just set the world on fire. You'd take a business that was making $5 million and it winds up when you finish, you turn in $25 million adjusted EBITDA. You had a bottom line of, close to 50 million and you wind up in the end, it sets off $150 million. So, it was always some of that. And then getting the Great White Fleet. When I left Chiquita, I wound up ascending into the top job as the head of global supply chain, what we call product supply at the time. We had a lot of P&G influence there. Right. And I was running the Great White Fleet, which was the largest U.S. flag carrier. I ran their controlled atmosphere division, which was called Transfresh, and had the ingredient solution division, which was called Chiquita Fruit Solutions. We rebranded and ran that globally, along with running the entire global operations for supply chain product supply, from source all the way to consumption of bananas, pineapples, and other tropical fruits. So right. I just got so many experiences, and that really teaches you to work with multinationals and having true relationships, and having those relationships really turn out to be rewarding for the long term, and how you rely on those relationships based on getting things done.
Yeah. Now, you went to Starbucks afterwards, and
I did. I got recruited out of Chiquita to go to Starbucks.
Yeah. Now, was that when the founder came back, or I'm trying to remember that
Yes.
time.
So Howard had already returned to Starbucks. I got a call, thought it was just absolutely a joke. I said, no, the recruiter can't be calling. It was on, an in-mail through LinkedIn.
Right.
And they had seen a bunch of the videos and other stuff that we had done, leading all the different aspects of Chiquita over the course of time. And when I found out it was real, it was right in the middle of a change between the prior CEO and the new CEO that was coming in.
Right.
And I'd worked for him for right at a year. We made the transition to move the company to Charlotte, North Carolina,
Right.
and everything was moving really well. And got that call, and I remember the day I went to Starbucks to interview, and you had all the top senior executives I'd read about, because I read every one of Howard's books prior to going. Just
Right.
did the homework like you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I met all the folks, and of course, every meeting you had to drink coffee, right? And I would do a coffee tasting at the beginning of every meeting.
Right.
By the time I got to Howard, I saw an open slot in the afternoon. I think it was 2:30 to 3:30, and didn't have any name in it. And then as well, Deverl, you're doing well with all these interviews. We're gonna, I think you're gonna wind up meeting Howard today. So I went into the office, and it was really interesting. It was a really simple question he asked. He goes, Deverl, if I broke, he goes, I don't know anything about your world, Deverl, but I do know enough to know that if you think about manufacturing, transportation, distribution, procurement, which one are you the best at and why? And he just asked it in that form.
Yeah.
And so I went down this path, and he goes, it's weird, Deverl. I do a lot of these interviews, but it's weird when my whole team says they really like this guy. And so that meeting was amazing, because of course the fact that he had came back and he was really trying to move things forward, and which he did. It was just truly, truly a pleasure to work on that executive team, and work at the management committee level, and working with that team. It was just a storyboard of top executives around the world. Of course, every executive that was on the management committee was amazing. And I learned a tremendous amount during that time. So that day of that interview was just, I look back on it and think about it. I actually wrote about a 3-page letter on the way home that night on the plane, just to remember and encapsulate all the things that day meant, and how the culture was so different than anything I'd experienced in my life.
Yeah. Fabulous. Well, after a couple of other moves, you're still in the coffee business. So tell us about how Farmer Brothers came along, and give us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of the company. I know they've been around since the early
Sure.
1900s.
I think from a standpoint of back in coffee, I really think I never really left produce. Now, coffee is a plant, and it grows on a coffee bush. And at the end of the day, I've really grown up in tropical fruits, leafy greens, and now coffee twice. And so Farmer Brothers is 110 this year.
Amazing.
They started out in Torrance, and they've acquired a lot of different companies over the years. And I evaluated the company over about 3 months prior to joining it, and really saw it as an opportunity. They had moved the company from Torrance to Dallas-Fort Worth to reset and build a new manufacturing facility, and bring the team out. And what does Farmers do? It really has 2 distribution components to it. It's a classic direct store delivery model, up and down the street, 50,000 accounts thereabouts that they serve, that are your favorite breakfast, lunch, and brunch locations where coffee, tea, and spice are served, and other culinary products. And they do that through the DSD. That's about 1/3 of the volume of coffee that's sold.
Wow.
2/3 of the volume of coffee that's sold is in the area of what we call national accounts or direct ship. And that's your big QSRs, your big convenience stores, big grocery retailers. And we do both branded and private label products. Our biggest branded product was when we acquired Boyd's Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And Boyd's is probably the 3rd oldest coffee company in America, out of Portland. And that was acquired before I joined, and we integrated that. And we have a lot of other brands, from Metropolitan to Superior to Cane's to Public Domain, and of course Farmer Brothers, which is core of the DSD network that we deliver across all states in the lower 48 today.
Yeah. Sweet. And you've been there, I guess, coming up on 3 years, 2.5 years now.
Yeah, two and a half.
Yeah, and that's your obviously your first CEO position. Tell me a little bit about kind of your leadership arc and what's changed over the years. Going
Yeah,
back
well,
to
it's
those
the
early
second.
days.
It's
Yeah.
my second CEO position, the
Okay.
first publicly traded
First public trade, right?
CEO.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I will tell you that in both turnarounds, my second big turnaround, and in the first turnaround, we wound up. It was a Danone company, and it was part of White Wave. That White Wave was purchased by Danone, and this was the Earthbound company within that White Wave division, and
Right.
then under Danone. And we did that in 18 months and had a lot of success in that and turning around a more than negative 50 million adjusted EBITDA and got it back to break even pass flow and then sold it to the largest strategic in that particular sector. And then I was just kind of floating along and deciding what I wanted to do next. And then here we
Right.
go, opportunity to get back into coffee. And that leadership arc, I think once you have that one first, even though I'd done turnarounds within multinationals, never a turnaround per se in fully leading a division or a company like Earthbound. So that gave me a lot of credibility. And as I met with the board and really talked to them about what's the opportunity, I felt like I was just talking about another similar
Mm,
story that I'd lived before. And I obviously had the knowledge of coffee, the knowledge of DSD from my days at Pepsi, my days at Chiquita with some DSD that we had there. And things just seemed to fit. And I was excited about getting back into coffee because once you go into coffee, you get very passionate. And there's such a storied history here at Farmer Brothers in regards to, all things coffee. And I was just excited to get back into an arena that I felt like I could really make a difference and had all the elements that you would want in a story. And I think I knew that prior to joining. And then who knew we were going to get COVID to make a turnaround probably 1,000 times harder than what it should have been. But the really good success is the frontline folks here at Farmer Brothers just connecting to their hearts and minds and their passion and reigniting that. We've been able to, as I tell the team, it's like a raging river and you got to get from one side to the other. And I said, it's not if we'll make it to the other side. I'm just not sure what shape we'll be when we get to the other side of the post-COVID world. But
Yeah.
we're there and we've survived, and people are still amazed at some of the work we've done and how we've done it through one of the more challenging, difficult times in maybe world history.
Yeah, no worries. And you kind of allude to culture when you answer that question. How do you do that, or how did you do that over this last 18 months? Because you joined just about 6 months before the pandemic hit,
Exactly.
and company culture is so important, and the CEO really kind of carries the flag on that. Was that difficult during that period of time?
I would say it's incredibly difficult. It has to be your first priority. And I always I told the board this day one, it will start with culture and end with culture, or better yet, it will start with people and end with people first.
Yeah.
And importantly about that aspect is the fact that you got to win the hearts and minds. And it's not just good enough to have a mission and vision statement, but you really need a purpose statement. Now, that's what I learned from Starbucks and remember many executive offsites and many conversations. Wow, they do that so well. I'm so impressed with what has been done over the years there and the learnings I was fortunate enough to take part in during my time there. So I said, we got to do the same. I did that at Earthbound. That was one of the things we had to rekindle. That was a 35-year-old company that started literally the organic industry. And I was trying to resurrect that from having gone through a lot of difficult times. And you got to respect the history. And I did the same here at Farmer Brothers. And as we got into it, I said, we got to go to the front line. We got to understand what is it that makes us who we are? Like, what's our purpose for being? It's not just making money. And believe it or not, the front line led us to the answer. And even to this day, COVID has been difficult to getting that message fully, engaged and trained and really living it. But it's there, and it really is cultivating connections through our love of coffee. You say such a simple statement. It has to be, right? If you're going to engage the hearts and minds of your front line, it's got to come from them. And we landed on that. And when we landed on that, cultivating connections, because we do cultivate coffee, but you also cultivate connections. And where do you cultivate? I would argue that everybody in life, no matter who you are, that probably some of the most important and meaningful conversations you've ever had was around your kitchen table over a cup of coffee in the morning,
or a meal,
and it's around a beverage, and it's either around a glass of iced tea,
yeah,
or a hot cup of coffee of your choice.
yeah.
And it's so representative when you get into the depths of what we were trying to tap into, because our customers and then their customers, which are consumers, they do that in these engagements, and they love our frontline route service representatives and service techs.
Yeah.
And these RSRs, as we call them, or service techs, they're the lifeblood of our company.
Right.
And it's just engaging them and giving them a reason to believe. Pandemic didn't help because we had to furlough a lot of those folks. We've been working hard to get them all back at the front line and keep the company moving. And that's always a challenge, because I think you always have this cultural challenge of the folks that are functional, that support the business. Really, as I learned at Pepsi, it was always about right side up, right? The CEO is that it's not the pyramid up, but you flip the pyramid, and the most important people are the ones at the front. And I learned that at an early, period in my career, and I've never forgotten that, right side up concept, and try to live that from a servant leadership perspective as much as one can. And the pandemic's made it tough, and you got to react to that. But I think that's a component that got us through and gave us a reason to believe and engage the hearts and minds and win those hearts and minds.
I love it. What do you personally look for when you are making bets on the people you invest in and hire at Farmer Brothers?
It really is their leadership, but that's easy, right? At least saying it. But it's really trust and teamwork. And I look at trust and really go deep into what are the elements that create trust. And some are easier to identify than others, but one of my mentors, Tim Stratman, who's been a coach of mine for many, many years, probably almost coming up on 20 years. And he taught me this way back when, probably one of the first years we were together. He said, Deverl, you look at trust and you ask yourself, what are the components of trust? Well, it's competency, which, most people can figure competency element. It's willingness to do the job. That's not too hard to do either. You can determine if people want to do what needs to be done, and they can work together as a team. And then the third one is the hard one, and that's loyalty. And loyalty, willingness to do the job, and competency together equal trust. And the speed of trust is everything. And I've had it happen a few times. We're getting very close here at Farmer Brothers to crack that. But for those that know what I'm talking about and have had that level of trust at the most senior level, where you really do have that person's back no matter what happens, and when the worst of the worst breaks out, trust is what holds it together, and the respect of that. So I really try to test for trust in lots of ways in the interview process. And I think the team that's here today will suffice it to say that they know that's a part of who we are, and they understand those elements, and they understand, their competencies and their focus on their personal energy and their life balance, and that they're one person. They don't split themselves between, what they do away from work and who they are at work, because we do spend a disproportionate amount of our lives at work, and they understand that.
Yeah, cool. Well, Deverl, we're just about out of time, but I do have one last question we always ask all our guests, and that's kind of what kind of career and life advice you'd give someone who maybe is mid-career and, maybe like you, has spent 8 to 10 years at a couple of big companies, but they've got their eyes on the corner office. What would you tell them to do to, help them along their way to get there?
Yeah, this is a great question. And here's what I tell everybody. And for those that know me well and that we get to this level of conversation, I say, it's all about mind, body, and spirit, and you can't separate those. And more importantly, stay balanced, stay commitment. Stay balanced and stay committed. And you're one person, and you don't split that reality of what you do at work versus what you do in your personal life. And you've got to focus on what you can control, because control is an illusion. And I've learned as an engineer and an ops person and, all the things I've done in my career, that early on I thought everything was about control. Well, you just have to control it. Well, you learn quickly that control is an illusion, and you can control everything within about 6 feet, 3 feet one way or the other. And that means you can control yourself, nobody else.
That's right.
I cannot convince you to do anything you don't want to do.
That's right.
And I think what that comes through is this kind of simple kind of view that I've taught my kids, and they know these is mind, body, spirit. Stay balanced, stay committed, and work hard. And I do believe that does go a long way. And you don't always have to be the smartest, but you definitely have to put the smartest people around you, and don't ever fear hiring somebody who's smarter than you. Period.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Deverl Maserang, President and CEO of Farmer Brothers, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.